afternoon and welcome to the Lessons of Vietnam show. I am Bill Dixon, your host, and today we're going to be talking about something a little different than what we've talked about in the past. But before we do that, let me tell you a little bit about our show and so forth. Emma, we on a slide. There we go. Lessons of Vietnam. It's an online show. You figured that out because you're online with us. We try to tell the true story of the Vietnam War as opposed to the myths and lies and half-truths and misunderstanding. We're brought to you on the second Monday of each month at 3 p.m. By Nissan Communications. Amnon takes good care of us and gives us broadcasting and tells us what to do because he's good at this, and we appreciate all his hard work putting up with me and my guests sometimes. To see archive shows, by the way, go to www.nissancommunications.com and select On Demand, and then select the show from the LOV list, which is the Lessons of Vietnam. I am your host, as I said, Bill Dixon, Vietnam veteran, 1967-68. I was with the headquarters company, 1-5 Engineer Group out of Long Bend. And as we go through the show, I'll be inviting you to give us a call at 919. My screen just 919-518-9773. My screen cut off as many times I have given it. I can't remember it by now. But there it is, 518-9773. Or even go into Skype at Computers 2K Voice. You can make comments, ask questions, or whatever you'd like to do. Now, very important is our next slide we're going to be talking about here is, okay. Where do we have that one? And not, there we go. Okay. I knew it was there someplace. The Veterans Crisis Line. A lot of things going on right now with the fall of Afghanistan, with Vietnam vets and Afghanistan veterans. All of it compacted with the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So if you're out there, you are a veteran, you know a veteran, you're married to a veteran, and there's some stress there, please call the 1-800-273-8255 and press 1. And that way you have someone 24 hours a day to reach out and talk to you. Sometimes all you need is somebody to listen, and that's a good way to do it. And so I thank you for doing that. If you're having stress or feeling bad, please call these people and we don't lose you and so forth. We have a very special guest today. I've known him for a little while. This man is probably works harder for veterans than any three people I know of. He is Command Sergeant Major Paul Berry, United States Marine Corps. I will not say he used to be in the Marines because if you're a Marine, you're always a Marine. He works for several and with several Vietnam or veteran support nonprofit organizations. He's all over the state. Anywhere there's a veteran in need, Paul Berry is there. He did 11 deployments in his 30 years, 3 in Afghanistan, 3 in Iraq. I can't even read my own writing today, and 1 in Afghanistan. He was there for 13 months. Let's see what Paul Berry looks like in our picture here. I got him.
Hey, Bill, hopefully I didn't break your camera.
Nope. Well, we got the real Paul Berry here. I had a picture of you with all those medals on your chest. I'll tell you what, that was a chest full of medals there. I guess when you become a Command Sergeant Major, you go through a lot. There it is, right there. Hold on. Okay. M9 is not going out on the air.
I can see it on my end.
See it on yours? Okay, well, I can see it on
the
little screen. Anyway, if you can see it, that's the picture. Actually, one picture was taken on 9/11, the one on the right. And then the Command Sergeant Major picture right there with all those medals. I don't know where he learns how to walk with all those without leaning over that side. That's a medal thing. So let's go ahead and get into the show because that's what we're here about. Paul and I have been talking for some time, and Paul has been very concerned about how the Afghanistan vets have been affected by the fall of Kabul in Afghanistan. And us Vietnam vets been looking at it, and it brings back a lot of memories, not necessarily good memories. And so it's been tough on the Vietnam veterans to see. It's like deja vu all over again. Uh, so what we want to do is kind of talk to the Vietnam vets and Afghan vets and talk about the similarities and the differences, and what I think most veterans are thinking about was why, not necessarily why we were there as much was it worth it to me? I lost a buddy. Was it what was it for? What was it worth it? Paul, you want to take up from there and kind of give what you, what the Afghanistan vets are thinking?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I really appreciate this opportunity. Yeah, there's some similarities of even our departure from Iraq, but I'm gonna focus on Afghanistan for this afternoon. Um, there's a lot of younger veterans, and I'm probably one of the older Afghan veterans. There's a lot of younger veterans, a lot of 20 something, 30 somethings out there that did multiple deployments. I've met ones that have been there 5 and 6 times to Afghanistan because of what they did. When you're there that long, just like your time in Vietnam, you really get to understand what's going on over there. And when it doesn't end well, and I was a young, but I do remember the fall of Saigon, and I was a young boy, and the confusion that was going on, even in my own household. My dad was an Army vet, previous to Vietnam. My mom was an immigrant from Germany during the Nazi Germany, World War II, and she was very upset about what went on. And I was a young boy and didn't understand what was going on and why she was so upset. It's because she grew up under Nazi Germany, and then her feelings about what was about to take place under communist Vietnam were very similar to when you fast forward today, when you're a veteran and say, was it all worth it? I lost 19 on my tour. I had over 300 wounded. We had hundreds of Afghan soldiers, hundreds of Afghan soldiers and police, border police, uh, killed in action who served very bravely, including the Afghans alongside of us. And when it doesn't end well, uh, you know, every day I question, since the end of August, we lost 11 Marines, one Navy corpsman, and that one soldier, brave soldier, that really was it all worth it? I have to kind of sometimes step back and keep it really simple, kind of take the politics out of it, and then go back and look at my buddies. I know this, Bill, that the opportunity to be on this call today is important to me personally. So there's personal benefit from this, even, but hopefully I can benefit anyone else that's on the call today on helping them understand that it's about, whether we were drafted or we volunteered for this does not matter. We all served. Uh, a lot of us in these now several generations from Vietnam all the way through Afghanistan gave a lot. And a lot of them gave everything they had, including their life. It's about the soldier, the Marine on your left or right, and doing the right things. And I can say without a doubt that all my tours in Iraq, my time in Afghanistan, I couldn't have been more proud of, in my case, all those younger service members, all those Marines, all those soldiers, all those Navy corpsmen that I served with, that it did matter. And it, for 20 years, we kept the bad people away. Evil does not sleep. Evil does not rest in these countries. We know that there is evil in this world that does not rest. We can't rest either. We did our time and we did it right.
Looking back, comparing what looked like it was total chaos of leaving, and I look at the total chaos of the fall of Saigon. And in our instance, in the fall of Saigon, the ambassador just didn't really believe that the fall of Saigon was going to happen, even though everybody around him kept saying, and he didn't want to create the panic that he created. Uh, there was a lot of there was lots of misinformation came out about that too. The famous picture of the helicopter on the American embassy, which it was not in reality, was not the American embassy. It was a CIA building back behind the embassy. That building is still there at Vietnam. I've seen it, but the embassy is gone. Information there. You saw people on the airplane getting knocked off the airplane so the airplane could take off. So many similarities there, and not getting out all the people out. Uh, that was really hard to see. Uh, us kind of sticking our tail between our legs and trying to get out of there and look like without looking like it was total defeat and trying to escape and so forth. That the pictures actually showed a worse story than I think it really was. And I think summertime, we left a lot of good people. Well, we have been back over there, and Special Forces organization has brought in a lot of the Montagnards from over there. So a lot of the people who fought for us were have been brought back over. I have friends that when Saigon fell, they continued fighting. They were Vietnamese. One friend of mine, he said he was a major. He went from machine gun to 12 years in slave labor camp.
Yeah.
And those slave labor camps were pretty bad. But you want to talk about communism, this man can tell you all about it. So, but he is here now. So time will tell. But at the same time, we looked at, and we come up with a saying, which kind of hard right now is, it don't mean nothing. It did mean a whole lot to us when a buddy got wounded or got killed. But the saying was, it don't mean nothing because we got to go to do the same thing tomorrow as we did today, was one of our coping mechanisms to a certain extent to get through it. Because you knew today, what you did today, you're probably going to do the same thing tomorrow and the day after that. What we really fought for was the guy in the foxhole with us, your buddy, and the buddy on the side of him, and then mom and apple pie, and then maybe for the U.S. government. But that was the last. Was the government was last? Winning the war in Vietnam. I did my part. My wife told me when I went to Vietnam, if I got killed, she'd kill me. Because I was married 3 years when I went. So I did my job and came home. I did the best job I could do. And looking at what the with Afghanistan, you as a military, you went over and did a great job, fantastic job. Like you said, we haven't had another 9/11. It's been 20 years since we had that problem. You saved a lot of American lives in the process. So what you were doing did count. It did mean a whole lot. This country's been free. The Afghanistan was able to teach their women in schools and address and to think. And I couldn't believe it when I saw the other day women over there protesting, holding up signs about wanting rights and so forth. That would be unheard of 20 years ago with the Taliban and so forth. It'll be interesting to see how that comes out. So, yes, it did matter what you did. In case of Vietnam, when the peace treaty was signed, a lot of people don't know this, but when the peace treaty was signed, at that time, Nixon and Kissinger knew South Vietnam is going to fall. What he asked the communists was, give me 18 months. Give me 18 months till we can get out, because that way it won't look so bad. So they had an agreement. And after about 2 years, the communists did a little attack. We didn't do anything. The communists did a little bit bigger attack. We didn't do anything. So then they started a full-scale attack. But they did give us 18 months. The Taliban, who is a totally different mindset, didn't give any interval at all. They come in right at time. So that was some of the things that what you saw as far as the chaos there with their coming in, but not in politics, but the whole episode there was just totally mishandled. Military, administrative, and people. A lot of people knew a month or so before we were going to be getting out, And why some of them stayed so late, not quite certain. I know that there was shipping people out on the kind of on the quiet for a long time. So I'm gonna turn it back over to you because you were there and know the better. But I try to give you an idea of the feeling from the Vietnam veteran. We still question to a certain extent, was it worth it? I will tell you from the 17,000 plus Vietnamese who live in this area, every time I see them, they're always thanking me for fighting for their country. Even though our government walked off and left them very similar to, and knowing it was going to fall, very similar to what happened in Afghanistan, the people who are Vietnamese Americans here uh, go out of the way to show appreciation to Vietnam vets fighting their country. So they felt like we were there for a reason, and we gave them an opportunity to get here. So sometimes it's hard to sit back and go, well, this was it worth it? It was to them, even though they lost their country. Uh,
Hey, Bill.
and we did slow down the communism to a great deal. The communism in Vietnam is totally different than other communism. There's a lot of free enterprise going on there. So while we were there, sometimes it got cloudy, but the fact that we were there and we did the best job we could do, and all the ones that have come here now, most of them are doing very well. So we can look back on the pride at what we did, and we want the Afghanistan veterans to feel the same way. You did your job, you did it well, you came back, and hopefully you got that seed of freedom and so forth that in the minds of the Afghanistan's there, and hopefully someday they can throw out that terrible group that's there, but they won't drink the Kool-Aid. I think that the Taliban has been able to get by with in the past.
Hey, Bill.
Yes, sir.
Are we going to use any of the PowerPoint at any
Yes,
time?
sir. There are Paul's pictures. Paul, you want to show your pictures and then go into?
Okay.
Go ahead and
Sure.
show that first slide if you would. Paul, what's going on there?
So this is down in Southwest Afghanistan where we were at. I was a sergeant major for a Marine 2-star command. So if you were in Vietnam, it's probably the Marine amphibious force level. You want to equate it to Vietnam. That was on Memorial Day, 2013. And if you look in the background, that's our flagpoles and all of our partner nations. But I did a really brief ceremony because you can't hang out there because just like Vietnam, they love to shoot Katyusha rockets at you in a place like that. But the majority of those troops back there are British. So it was much more than just us. There you go. Thanks for that. There you can see from all these different countries. You don't see any U.S. troops right there in that particular platoon. Those are all senior NCOs and officers from other foreign countries that were there alongside of us to fight terrorism.
A lot of people think we were the only ones there. You right offhand, can you remember the countries?
We had, the Brits were there. We had, little countries like you wouldn't even think of, Bahrain, former Yugoslavia countries like now that broke up, like Serbia. The country of Georgia had a pretty big presence right there. The Estonians, you think of these little countries that broke away from the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union collapsed, were actually troop contributing nations because they knew what it was like to live under a brutal regime. And while their contribution may only be 1,000 or 500 or 1 battalion, they were willing to put it all on the line, which is very impressive. And it's a great feeling to realize that they were with us, just like we were there to fight along our fellow Americans. They were there to be alongside of us. That was very, very refreshing to see.
That's important for the American people to realize that it was not all United States, just like in Vietnam. The South Koreans had a big presence there. Australians and New Zealand had a presence there, and a couple other countries. A few
Absolutely.
Canadians were there. It wasn't all United States. There was a lot of wars inside the wars too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that photo there, that's also 2013. That's That's me when I was much younger, better looking. But that is moment of silence, the prayer. I think that was, and that was probably either Memorial Day or Veterans Day. And I'll just say, I'll fast forward to, I'll assume that picture was Veterans Day. Um, it's a U.S. Holiday, Veterans Day. But we had just as many foreigners show up. That particular photo is Marine Corps birthday, 2013. These are infantry Marines in a former drug lord's home that they had taken over as their battalion headquarters. That's about 4 o'clock in the morning on Marine Corps birthday. And you're a Marine vet, you know how big Marine Corps birthday was. And I flew to about 30 locations that day, and we had frozen little birthday cakes. It's the little things. Again, it's about those troops. Every one of them standing there, I was old enough to be their father. They're all young. It's infantry. They're all 19, 20. 25 is considered old in the infantry if you're still alive and made it that far. You're a staff sergeant 27, you're the old man. But that's why we did it. That was me talking to, I think that was 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines. So if you're a Marine vet on here, you'll remember 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, right, from Vietnam. And we carried it forward.
November 10th is the Marine birthday. November
absolutely.
10th.
The world comes to a halt on 10 November for the Marine Corps birthday. That's back then on the right, General Amos coming out of the Marine Corps, and on the left, Sergeant Major Mike Barrett, Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, presenting a Purple Heart to a Marine I had that got wounded from 1st Battalion, 9th Marines. Again, if you're a Marine vet from the Vietnam era, that's the Walking Dead, the famous Walking Dead. Fast forward all those years, and 19, still there. That staff sergeant, that was his 2nd Purple Heart. He got one while he was in country. He got shot through the hand, and because he was a mean staff sergeant, he wouldn't let him send him home. So he just stayed in country, even though he got shot. And the story on this is his platoon commander had to go home on emergency leave. His father passed away. So the staff sergeant stepped into the lieutenant's position. They went out on a patrol, and their armored vehicle got hit by an RPG. And you can see his left arm right there. His left arm got split open like a overcooked hot dog from a shrapnel RPG. And that's him at Bethesda back in the States getting his Purple Heart. I got to see him not long after it happened. And remember, the lieutenant's on emergency leave, staff sergeant's leaving, so the next person in charge is a young sergeant, probably 23 years old. This is all about that guy on your left or right, the guy on your left or right. This is what this was about. We put that staff sergeant on a plane, and he was crying his eyes out because he was leaving his guys. That's what this is about. That's right after I got to Afghanistan in 2013. There's 2 Marine sergeants there. That was during a dignified transfer. We had a staff sergeant, I think he was an engineer, hit an IED. The enemy's ruthless. They're well funded, and they made what was called a Trojan HorseIED, so they can take a device like a cell phone or a handheld radio that Marines, sailors, and soldiers have now, and actually buy the shell of that device as it would come from the factory, but pack it full of explosives. That's what they did. They made it look like a radio, exactly like a US radio, but it had a tilt switch in it so that when he put it up on end, it was a mercury tilt switch. It went off inside of his vehicle. But those were 2 sergeants that were on his team that were close to him. And again, I just want to drive home the point. Politics be damned. Politics don't always work out. But those Marines were doing what they're supposed to do, and they did their best that day. And you could see the emotion on their face. They had been there for a year. They were a week from going home when this happened. The enemy doesn't sleep, and it's powerful. Thanks. That's also 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines. And if you were ever in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, it's way up north in a place called Nowzad, where there's a company there. Somewhere in there, I'm in there. The 2 stars in there are Navy Master Chief, but I never felt more safe or more at home than when I was around a platoon of young Marines or soldiers, whether they're engineers, I don't care, aviation. They did it right, and they did it right in there for years. So just very comforting to be around a group like that, and that is why I went over. I was 46 years old when I went over to Afghanistan. I could have went out to pasture and retired, but Marines don't do that. I had the honor to serve alongside great people like that. Thank you. That's from our country of Georgia, right there. That's on the left, the commander from the country of Georgia, an infantry battalion. And, their guys really laid it on the line. They were in a bad place too. And I think their worst day, we talk about the tragedy of losing 13. And I think it was either 11 or 13 Georgians I had killed in one day in one attack. And it was also a vehicle borne IED. So very similar to the attack in Kabul in 2013, where I think it was about 10, maybe 11 Georgians killed, an entire squad. It was a squad of their infantry. The entire squad was killed by a vehicle-borne IED. But again, why we do this is because we're taking care of the person on our left or right. It never even made the news. Bill, I've told you and others, it never even made the news. I want the sacrifice to be acknowledged, and really just sometimes boil it down to we're going to take care of each other. That's the battalion. That's the commander presenting me with some awards. There's a traditional dagger he has in his hand, and even though we weren't allowed to have alcohol over there, the Jordans could care less. They don't care. That's some wine from the country of Georgia. Those two items sit on a shelf to never be touched again. I got too much respect for what they did. They were tough. We learned a lot from serving alongside that country. They were just physically tough, determined that terrorism is not going to come to their country. And I liked the example they set. Thanks. This is an forward operating base Roulette. Strange name, Roulette. Named after Corporal Roulette, the United States Marine Corps, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines. He, back in the late 2000s, around 2009, they sent a Marine Corps infantry battalion into this area where they probably should have sent 5,000. We didn't know how much enemy was in there. It was like Vietnam. Sent them into a valley and it'd be a bloodbath. He was on a squad patrol. He didn't even have a sergeant. Squad leader's normally a sergeant. He was a corporal. They got into a heavy firefight just over the back. The guy pointing at us, the general, but over that hill, it gets like jungle. They get to Vietnam by the river. They got ambushed and down. He had to bring in air support. They were bringing air support from Cobras to 20 millimeter guns within 25 meters of his position. He got shot, was severely wounded, but he was the only one that knew how to control air support. And they couldn't even bring an air medevac in because the enemy situation was so bad. So they had to get him out by vehicle. He didn't make it. He succumbed to his wounds. He was later awarded the Navy Cross for his actions that day as a 21, 22-year-old corporal. Just think of the bravery. That was a monument right there that was built by the British. British now occupied this, and you can see the Brits back there behind me, the one with the boonie cover on, as you call it. But behind me is the British Sergeant Major. They made that cross out of shell casings, and every service member who died, they put up a brass placard. There was a little tiny chapel on that forward operating base that if you were a new troop coming in, the sergeant major made you go to the chapel. And on the chapel wall was that Marines Navy Cross citation. No matter what your rank was, you had to read that citation out loud. And the sergeant major would look at the new troop, and don't care if you were a colonel or a private, and he would say, "Don't let him down." And it was just resonated how powerful it was. But I was there when they tore this place down. We were leaving Afghanistan. So we tore this place down. All that got shipped back to Camp Lejeune. Sits down there at Camp Lejeune now. We did not let any of that stay out there on the battlefield. We took all that home with us. Thanks. That's definitely probably Veterans Day. It's a little bit better picture of the regional command. That's the general and I standing there saluting. Again, just very humbling how big of a coalition this really was that came together. So we think that, my personal opinions is that this was a gut punch to America here recently, particularly all veterans who served, no matter what area you served. This is tough to process, just like Vietnam, extremely hard to process. But just like Vietnam, we have all these other countries who spent a lot of money. They also spent a lot of their national treasure, which was troops that they lost over there too. I didn't put photo in this slide deck out of respect to all of them, but I have a series of photos of the photo of every service member we ever lost, no matter what country they were from, where I was at. And it was on, we were in a plywood building, no different than Vietnam, for a command post. And we had a photo of the date they were killed of every service member that ever died in my region. The morning I left Afghanistan on about February, around Valentine's Day of 2014, I got up about 4 in the morning and I walked down that passageway, as we say in Marine speak, and I looked, and it was over 600 names that I saw from mostly American Marines, and then mostly Brits. But after that, there's still many more from other countries. And we would make sure that on days like Veterans Day that we would pause, even forward deployed in combat. We didn't do that formation for no more than 5 minutes, but we would pause for 5 minutes because we had to get back to war. Plus, the enemy, like I said, like to shoot rockets at us. Thanks.
And we've got the World Trade Center North Tower after it collapsed. Was hit by American Airlines Flight 11. And so we're going back to this is the World Trade Center South. United Airlines Flight 175 hit that one. That's Shanksville, where the passengers took over the plane and crashed it because the word was it was going to either to the Capitol or to the White House. It took a lot of nerve. That was United Airlines Flight 93. And that's something that I don't want to ever happen again. I'm a grandfather, and I look at that, and somebody put that there for their grandfather. That is a memorial at the in New York at the World Trade Memorial. If you haven't been, I highly recommend you go. But it is very emotional to see all those names. It's very similar to going to the Vietnam Wall. And this is what we fought for. As I said a while ago, the guys beside you and family at home. What I want to ask you, comparing that, how I think people who had never been in a war like you went through and the Vietnam veterans went through, anything from a child to an old man or old woman could be danger, because we didn't know who the good guys were or the bad guys. And y'all went through the same thing, and there's no way you could ever relax anytime, 365 days, 24 hours a day.
But there was no downtime. It was never safe, and it's and Iraq was the same way. So I did 3 years and about almost 2 years of my life and 3 tours. In Iraq, it was the same way. But Afghanistan, like Vietnam, you didn't know who the enemy was. And the enemy might be an Afghan soldier who had been recruited to be sympathetic towards the enemy. So the big thing in Iraq and Afghanistan, but particularly Afghanistan, was what was called the insider attack. So an Afghan military member, soldier, would either have a suicide vest or their rifle or both, and their goal would be to kill as many Americans as they could. And they were successful on a much larger scale than I can ever stomach. I will say, when we got there, my boss, my general, talked to the Afghan army boss and said, we will not lose any U.S. Marines to insider attacks. And we didn't. We had insider attacks, but we didn't lose any Marines to insider attacks. There were dead Afghan soldiers who tried to attack us. I know it's pretty brutal, but I want to make sure that 19-year-old PFC gets home, see his wife and his kids, because by then I knew what that was about. The enemy, they were everywhere. It could be kids, it could be a bicycle that's parked. With the advent of technology,
you said a while ago, a telephone.
Yeah, it could be anything. So it was
civilians out there don't look at, you can't understand that unless they were there and went through it. It just no way you can comprehend a thing like a phone laying down. You just got to be real careful with it.
Yeah, a water bottle, an empty bottle, have a mine underneath of it with a pressure release. The inability to ever shut down, even in a combat zone. So, when you take,
Even if you were inside the wire,
yeah,
they get you
even
the rocket.
even inside the wire. So you take an all volunteer force. In my case, and I went to other places. I was in the former Yugoslavia, Somalia, all these other places too, prior to Iraq and Afghanistan. And I don't think when we thought of having an all volunteer force at the end of the draft at the end of Vietnam, ever realized that we would get into a 20-year war. What happens is war can become business, to be frank. You have an all volunteer force that has good benefits and decent pay these days. Seriously, it is. It can be, if not, we're not careful. I think if the nation's ever at war, we should always be scrutinizing how long are we there, why are we there, and when are the troops coming home, and what conditions need to be set. Vice 20 years somewhere, have we met conditions? I watched it creep in Iraq. I was there at the beginning in 2003. It was what you would think of almost landing on the beach in Normandy. We were invading a country. Much different. Going back in 2005, things had changed. It started to become a contractor war. I went back to Iraq for 13 months in 2007, and it was all about contractors, and people were making money and profiting. And, is that the right thing? I don't think so. War as a business is something we must always be careful about. Back to Afghanistan, what I know about the Taliban is they're going to align with whoever has the most power and money, whoever has the most guns. That's what they are. They are ruthless. I won't even get into the details. Just read the news, use multiple news sources, and read what the Taliban has done and what they are capable of doing to their own people. It is no different than the communists. It is no different in Cambodia. It is no different than the Chinese. They are absolutely ruthless in what they will do. We worked with thousands of interpreters and contractors that are Afghan citizens, thousands. And there are Marines and soldiers and others alive today because those interpreters were more than just interpreters. They knew the lay of the land. They knew the locals. They knew the intel. They knew when something was wrong because they grew up there. They no different than Vietnam. They knew something was wrong. They knew what areas for us to avoid. They knew what areas to go. They would bribe kids so that the kids knew where the IEDs were. So they would bribe the kids. The kids would let us get through. We have just like the Vietnamese refugees, we have a debt that's even hard to pay back. And I think what you will see is all these Afghans who supported the U.S. for all those years, they're going to come together and as a strong community, just like the Vietnamese immigrant community has come together and been strong for all these decades inside of this country. And I think they're going to come together. Like you said, maybe they have lost their country, but I don't think they're going to lose who they are and what they sacrificed.
The Vietnamese people here, they celebrate Tet. They still They still keep their country there. They still honor their country and so forth. One of the things I also want to talk about was most civilians don't understand another problem that you have when fighting a war is Vietnam and Afghanistan, Iraq, and so forth, was a thing called rules of engagement. Those of, we were blamed about killing during the Vietnam War. We were blamed for killing a lot of civilians. Unfortunately, a lot of civilians were put out front by the communists and so forth. But the rules of engagement in Vietnam, if you were a pilot and you were flying an airplane and you saw a MiG on the ground, you were not allowed to shoot it unless it was in the air. Rules of engagement. If you were flying to North Vietnam and you saw a SAM missile site under construction, you were not allowed to shoot it unless it was operational. Y'all's rules of engagement were even worse than ours, which I thought ours was unbelievable. You could see a guy in Vietnam like you were going through the Mission River plantation and you got shot at. Well, what you were supposed to do is get on the radio and call the Providence chief or the South Vietnamese commander and say, we're getting shot at here in the Mission River plantation. We want permission to shoot back. And he said, well, let me talk to the Providence chief. The Providence chief would probably have to talk to somebody else. And you may get permission in a day or two to shoot back. And I know people in Afghanistan used to say they could see people setting the bombs, but they had to ask for permission. And by the time they got permission, the people had already set the bombs and gone. Talk a little bit about the rules of engagement, how it affected the soldiers over there, or the military over there.
Yeah, anytime we send our nation's best into harm's way, it normally starts out with much more open, less restrictive rules of engagement. And I'm sure when they came ashore in 1965 with the first Marine units, the rules of engagement were much looser, and it was more thought of as war. The enemy's over there, they're shooting at me. I will therefore engage and destroy the enemy. That's my mission. It's how I was trained as a Marine or a soldier. And it becomes more and more political. And I think the more we blur the lines between combat and nation building, it gets to be tough. So we want to build out a community or a province to have a good economy and good agriculture. But at the same time, you're still conducting combat operations in there. It causes the rules of engagement to get pretty restrictive. I would believe in many cases, I think the Taliban understood our rules of engagement better than we did some days, and what they could and could not do. No different than the Vietnamese being able to do things and then being able to disappear and disappear for as long as they needed to disappear. So the Afghans were no different. The Taliban were no different. If there was a heavy U.S. presence, they would use our rules of engagement against us. So pillage women, whatever it took, children, whatever they would do. And they are pretty good at using the press against the U.S. military, no different than Vietnam, is to make it unpopular and just say that Afghan civilians were killed when, without a doubt, any country, let alone the U.S., when they were engaging with the enemy, the last thing we wanted to do was kill innocent civilians. Just like in Vietnam, the enemy would set the conditions to where it was almost inevitable sometimes that there would be casualties on all sides on purpose. They have no problem. How do you fight against an enemy that killed 13 of our service members, but there were close to 170 killed in that suicide bombing at the same time? That's their own people. They have no value of human life. Human life is just a poker chip. There's no, the same value that we have isn't there.
I've had for the all these years now been a debate. The United States lose the Vietnam War. And our situation was we weren't there when the war ended. Either way, we did. The soldier over there, the fighting man and woman over there, did not lose the war. Our war again was lost by the politicians, and South Vietnamese people were sold out by our leaders to a great deal of respect. That is almost identical to the situation in Afghanistan. The American military went out of their way to protect civilians. We did a good job. We gave them schools, we gave them hospitals, we gave them all kinds of stuff they never had before. The American soldier won their war in Afghanistan.
Yeah, absolutely. Politics. Yeah, it's something I'd talk about was how, while at war, we would send the commander home of a unit sometimes because we didn't have confidence in their abilities to lead on the battle. And we did that while I was in Afghanistan. We sent some company commanders home and some others who were commanders of troops because we didn't have confidence in their ability to lead. That's how important it is, because these are American lives. These are humans we're talking about. So we sent them home and said, you can't be a commander anymore because we don't have confidence in you. That level of scrutiny on ourselves, that we were holding ourselves to such a high standard, and to realize that politics can be like, it's just like whatever. It's a political move, and it's just like, the second and third order impacts of the fall of Saigon. I believe we still feel today with the region out in Southeast Asia and China, and some of the similarities that the fall in Afghanistan with no U.S. embassy presence is a big deal. No U.S. embassy in a country like Afghanistan means we lose our eyes and ears locally on the ground, and we don't have the same situational awareness that allows other countries like the Russians or the Chinese. They're already in there. They already were. The frustrating piece is, was it worth it for 20 years? Well, for 20 years, it kept the Russians out of it, it kept the Chinese out of it. Like I had said, there are bad people in this world who never sleep. We have to realize that. We have to accept that there are bad people. There are enemies of America. They are sworn enemies of America to undermine anything we do. Our presence, without having a presence there now, they have a heavy influence in the region, just like they did at the fall of Saigon. That we have to remain strong and resilient as a nation. And the next generation, even of our political leaders, the up and coming generation, the veterans of these wars, that when they get into business or politics, and I don't want to bring politics into this much, but they have skin in the game. They invested, in some cases, their fellow buddies' lives. They were wounded. I think they'll have a different take on when we go to war, put U.S. troops in harm's way. We're going to do it in a way that has the right outcome.
The one thing I think they learned from the Vietnam War, they sent units over in the beginning, units. But as they rotated back home, as they were people were injured or lost their lives, they were replacements. We were individuals going over to be replaced in a unit, where y'all went over as a unit. Part of our problem also was a lieutenant may be in the field for 6 months. By the time he's learned how to lead men in combat, he's rotated back to the back to get command responsibility. It was almost like it was a training ground for officers to get promotions and so forth. But by the time the guy got good at the leading men, they had him send him back and send another new guy up there who had to learn how to lead men in combat, because most of them had never seen combat and so forth before. And y'all work together, train together. That is good to have unit cohesion, but at the same time, you get to know each other real well. And when you lose one, I know it's got to rip at you, because sometimes we lose people not even know what their name was yet, let alone, but it still hurt. And now you got people that you train with. Emotionally, it's harder, but as far as the unit, it's I think, much better to go over as people that you know and depend on and so forth.
Yeah, it really is. We didn't really, well, we had individual combat replacements. It was not on a scale like Vietnam, where they rotated the individuals and kept the units there. I agree that units going over, when I went into Iraq in 2003, my unit had been together for 18 months. We had already spent time up in Kosovo on the same deployment. We had spent time in Djibouti, Africa. From the time we formed until the time we got back, it was almost 2 years. I had the same people, and I had a lot of NCOs. But I tell you what, you couldn't breathe without your buddy knowing why you were breathing a certain way. You went left, and he went left. He knew why you were going left. So you're right, Bill. It was that unit cohesion was something that they did learn from Vietnam. Was we were just more effective. I think we lost less than we could have. Every one of those is tragic. But I think with them being just so tight. They just knew how they thought. A drawback of that, and it's hard to acknowledge that, was if they did 4 years, they probably went to Iraq or Afghanistan once. So 2 deployments in 4 years. They either went to Iraq twice or Afghanistan twice, or Iraq and Afghanistan back during the peak of this 20 years cycle. When they got back, their unit would already start worrying about going back the next time. So if you were getting out of the Army or the Marine Corps, you got put into a pipeline to get out, and you got spit out back into society. And you came from where the unit cohesion was as tight as it ever had been, I think, in the armed forces of the United States history. It was just unit cohesion. Maybe World War II, when they went over on ships, so those long deployments to go over to Japan, is probably very similar, having talked to my father-in-law about his experiences in the Pacific. But once they got back and got out, they were totally isolated. They'd lost their whole support structure. And early on in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, we didn't recognize that loss of support structure. So you take someone who could never shut down while on deployment, who's hyper vigilant, and then you put them in a small town in America and expect them not to be hyper vigilant anymore, that everything's an IED, and that every time something goes off, something goes off, they have a reaction to it. We didn't have a good understanding of that early on in this. And, I think we started to learn from it. And, the casualties of these wars, 20 years in Afghanistan, it continues every day. I talked a little bit recently at that 9/11 ceremony you were at, Bill, that we lose about 18 a day to suicide, and we're averaging a little over 6,000 a year. And I said that point on Saturday, and I'll say it on here. We lose 6,000 veterans a year to suicide over 20 years. That's 120,000 veterans that have taken their life.
I think people don't realize that you get deployed while you're gone. Let's just say that you're a guy and you're married. While you're gone, the wife takes over and does everything, and then you come home and you start trying to have that man, woman who handles this and so forth, and maybe you start doing part of your job, and all of a sudden you're back deployed again. It had to be emotionally tough on the families, and they were involved because when you lost someone, the families knew who they were. I think for us, we didn't have cell phones and internet and all that sort of stuff, and I think it's great that you had it. But at the same time, I can't imagine talking to your wife at home and then and 30 minutes later going out in a combat situation. The emotions got to be going everywhere. And, I want that the Afghan soldier out there, it is nothing wrong with having emotional challenges. For Vietnam vets, we came back, we were already taught we're crazy, so we were afraid to show much emotion, but everybody thought we were crazy anyway. There is a lot of help out there, and don't be ashamed to say, I need help, because I can tell you, you're going to need help with the emotions that you have gone through. You did not lose the Afghanistan war. What you did there was good, but emotions are going to come back. I know right now, a lot of the Vietnam vets are getting old, retiring, and a lot of those memories are coming back now. In 2 weeks, I'll be 77. My nightmares are coming back now. I didn't have when I came home, but 50 years later, they're out there. But we started with the vet centers. And I tell you what, they are there for the family. My wife goes to a group for a spouse. I go to a group. We sit around and talk bullshit and so forth. But at the same time, we understand each other. We were there. We saw the movie. We bought the T-shirt, read the book, all that. So don't be afraid to reach out either to another soldier or go to the vet centers and so forth. Paul, what would you tell the Afghanistan vets today that are just getting home and trying to adjust to the situation?
yeah, that it's okay to not feel okay today, but reach out. I've used vet centers. I've used many services. Here I am, a 30-year sergeant major. I'm supposed to be tough. I tell you what, you send enough young kids home in coffins, see enough wounded, that stuff will do stuff to you. It's going to impact you for life. It's okay. You volunteered to go to war. You're an Afghan vet. Those things are going to happen. You have to rely upon each other. I would be remiss if I did not. When I first came in, my staff NCOs, as we call them, E6, E7, E89, they were all Vietnam veterans when I came in. They were a tough bunch. And I can't thank you Vietnam veterans enough for being a tough bunch. You guys survived combat in Vietnam in the worst of conditions under very poor and questionable political conditions. And that's who trained me. What is comforting, and I want my fellow Afghan vets who may be quite younger than me to realize we have something like, Bill, what you just put together today, what you continue to do, so that the Vietnam veterans said, despite the way we were treated, we're not going to let another generation who have fought under tough conditions and under questionable political outcomes suffer. We're going to be there. It's impossible that, Bill, there's plenty of things you and many others could be doing. Like you said, you're going to be 77 years old, but you choose to do this. That's what good soldiers do. That's what good Marines do, is they continue to serve. That's the comforting piece for the Afghan vets to realize. And if it's your family and if it's your wife and your kids that went through all this, there's tons of help out there. And if you don't know where to go, I promise you, doing the work I do with nonprofits, we can find any kind of service you want, including if you just need to talk to somebody. It's hard to process all this when you lose your buddies and then see what happened with the fall of Kabul. How do you process that? I think it's a dark chapter, but it's not the end of America. We're going to move on. We're going to find a way, but we carry that burden. There is no greater burden than to have been a war veteran for this country. Whether you go back to the Civil War or you go to those Marines that just left the other day. They just got home to Camp Lejeune, that unit where they lost at Sergeant Gee. They're getting home this week down to Camp Lejeune. If you want to see what right looks like, look it up on the news. And every street is lined, as far as you can see, for every service member. The Vietnam veterans didn't get that. They got spit on. No programs. They weren't even told, they were told they weren't even eligible for the VFW because they didn't go to war.
They didn't want us. We were the first ones who lost the war.
And I'll just tell the vets, hey, the Vietnam vets want us, and they want us to connect. So thanks, Bill.
Paul, I think it's important for veterans out there, whether you're a Vietnam veteran or Afghan, Iraq, whatever, if you're a veteran of the United States military, you would not believe the organizations out there that are looking for you to help you in anything you need. There's somebody out there. And if you reach out to the right people, some of the organizations Paul is a member of or a leader for, there's nothing that you need that there's not somebody out there he can put his hand on to help you out there. But first of all, you need to work on be careful with your emotional stuff. Do not feel bad about reaching out, but know the Vietnam vets are behind you. All other veterans behind you. Nonprofit organizations, thousands of them out there are just waiting for you to say, I need help. So they can say, what do you need? How can we help? And don't ever feel like you're alone out there. I suffer from depression, and I know how that is the perfect perpetual machine out there. Depression won't let you do things that you know you need to do. Then you get more depressed because you didn't do it. Reach out there, because somebody has been there just like you are now, can talk to you, may not give you a whole lot of advice, but because you got to find your own way. But there's somebody out there wanting to talk and help you. Never, ever, ever think that you're alone and the world's closing in on you, because somebody's out there. I know I have been in the situation that I do about anything to get rid of the depression, because it's the most painful thing physically as you can go through. Just know that there's help out there, and don't give up. Just hang in there and reach out to some of the people like Command Sergeant Major Paul Berry and his organization. We appreciate what you did over there. You did a good job. You did your job. Unfortunately, the military and politics are separate, but I'm going to let Paul finish it up and so forth. But from an old guy who's been there, like I said, bought the T-shirt, read the book, and saw the movie, and going, what are they thinking about? There's help out there that we didn't have, and we fought hard to get you that help, and please use it. All is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I know we're up on time here, so I'll wrap up. I can't stress enough that I personally also know what depression and anxiety can do. No one's supposed to deploy that much. But when I was in, boy, I thought that's where I needed to be, was alongside my Marines. And that took 30 years, 11 deployments. I want to do it. But sometimes, be a good battle buddy, as we say in this Afghan era, in the Iraq era, is be a good battle buddy. If you haven't heard from somebody in a while, give them a call, shoot them a text. If they're local, depression and anxiety can be so powerful that they can't even pick up the phone. Bill, you know what I'm talking about. You can't even pick up the phone. And I've been there myself. I can't even pick up the phone. And then it gets worse. Sometimes you got to be there just like you were in the fighting pool, whether it was Vietnam or Afghanistan, and say, hey, I'm your buddy. I got your back. It's okay. Let's make this happen today. Let's get better together, one step at a time. You got to be proud of what you did. I could not be more proud of my Vietnam veterans and these local veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq. What we did was noble. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Bill.
Those who lost their sons and daughters, I know they're going, why did I lose my son and daughters? But I hope that what we've talked about today, realize that yes, you lost your son or daughter, but it was not in vain. They were doing what they wanted to do, and they made a difference, just like you did. Ronald Reagan said something one time about a lot of people go through life trying to figure out if they made a difference. Well, military guys and girls out there, you made a difference to somebody, someplace, and you made a difference to this country. And thank you for your service, and God bless you.
Thanks, Bill.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.